hello. Today we're going to do problem 2404, most frequent even element in an array. This is an easy, so it should be pretty approachable, and I hope that my solution is both intuitive and communicated well to assist you in your Leetcode career pursuits. All right, so we're given an integer array nums. Return the most frequent even element. If there is a tie, return the smallest one. If there is no such element, return -1. All right, so when you're dealing with frequencies, you're going to have to look at elements and count how many times they occur, right? You look at an element and say, I'm going to look at each element inside this array, 0, 1, 2, 2, 4, 4, 1, right? And I say, well, I'm going to have a ledger, right? This ledger, and it's going to be a dict. Why is it going to be a dict? Because dicts, we'll do a default dict just to make it a little bit easier, with a default value of 0, and we'll count how many times each thing occurs. So we'll look at each num and nums, and we're going to keep a count of how many times each thing happens inside of this thing. So we're going to say, normally you would do is you say ledger at the num plus equal 1, right? Because this dict will say each key is the number, and how many times it occurs is added 1 each time we see the number. So by the end, we'll get a count of everything, right? So if we print the ledger here, we should see that 4 occurs twice, and 2 occurs twice, and 1 occurs twice, and 0 occurs once, right? 0 occurs once, 1 occurs twice, 2 occurs twice, 4 occurs twice. But we have to make a little bit of a filter. Why do we have to make a little bit of a filter? Well, because we're supposed to return the most frequent even element. So we don't want to consider every element, right? Only if the num mod 2 equals 0 do we consider the number, right? Because we don't want to account for odd numbers, and checking if a number mod 2 equals 0 is a way to determine that that number is even. So now when we print the ledger, we shouldn't have information about non-even or odd numbers, right? So 0 occurs once, 2 occurs twice, and 4 occurs twice. All right, now we have to deal with this idea of returning the most frequent one. Well, the most frequent one will have the largest value in our ledger, right? Because we add 1 every time we see a number. So the one with the largest, the key with the largest value will be the maximum, right? So we have to also consider this idea of a tie, right? So if there's two numbers that occur the same number of times, we want to pick the one that occurs the least amount of time. Now we could do another pass through this dict, but I think a one-pass solution would be the most impressive, right? So we're going to say, we'll say that the most frequent number most frequent number is, well, let's see if we have, we'll set it to an odd number, -1 first, okay? Because -1 will never be inside of our ledger because it's an odd number. And also, if our solution ends up returning a case where there isn't any even numbers in our array, it'll return -1 because most frequent will be -1. So this is a natural candidate choice for the first value, right? Because if we go through and we never change the most frequent, then it'll be -1. And if we never change the most frequent, that means that we've never encountered an even number. So we'll say ledger number plus equal 1. And we'll say if ledger at this new number is greater than or equal to ledger at most frequent, or so this is saying, okay, we found a number that is occurring more frequent than what we assume is the most frequent, or the ledger at the num equals the most frequent, and num is less than most frequent. So if these things are true, that's basically saying we found something that occurs just as much as what we consider as the most frequent, but it's a smaller number, right? It occurs just as much as what we think is the most frequent, but it's a smaller number. If that's the case, then we'll say that num equals most frequent. Sorry, other way around. We'll say that, okay, well then this must be our most frequent. Equals none. And then when we're done, we just return most frequent. And we're done. We're not done, we're done. So let's see what's going on here. So this thing seems to think that the most frequent is 4. So let's print, so embarrassing. Let's print ledger again, just to make sure that everything went smoothly there. Two occurs twice, 4 occurs twice. Our most frequent here, so when it gets here, it's going to say most frequent is 1. Then here it's going to say greater than. It has to be greater than, not just equal. That's debugging in real time. I'm going to talk loud and assertive to make it seem like I'm an authority, even though I just made a really dumb mistake. See, I know what I'm doing. See, when you say it with deference, it sounds very believable. I never make mistakes. I never fail easies. But yeah, so that's the nature of the problem. So this is very similar to a problem I did a couple days ago. The beautiful thing about a problem like this is, well, yeah, think about the data structure you're going to use. You're probably going to use some sort of default dict to account for everything that you've seen, right? Frequencies. When you see frequencies, almost always, you're going to be using dictionaries. Let's get rid of this. That was just part of the example. Setting your default value to what's returned when you don't find any candidates within your array can save you some headache. Then how I built out kind of the system of keeping counters, but then put in this filtering feature, so we only consider evens, and then putting into this problem both of the cases where the most frequent num would change, right? So the most frequent num changes if we find a num that occurs more, or the most frequent num changes if we find a number that occurs just as much as our most frequent number, but that num is less than the most frequent number. And with that, you have the solution. 69. Be mature. Have a good day, everybody.